Hello, hello. So I'm the first speaker. I'm going to start off with a big question, because I have the right as the first speaker. What is a myth? Compared to stories, they were very different things. Anyone? If you're interested in myth, the School of Myth down in Devon is a great place to go, and this is the definition from a professor called Sean Cain. It's a great one. So what is the difference between a myth and a story? And what is the definition of a myth? Well said. Myths have no author. That's the thing. No one can sit down on their laptops, however well-meaning, and write a myth. It's a very interesting thing, that, isn't it? What does that mean? If myths don't have an author, where do they come from? So Sean Cain, who The Wisdom of the Myth Teller is a great book to pick up, he would say that it's the land that is speaking. Myths is the power of the land that is speaking. Now imagine that. So myths have no author, and it's the power of the land speaking. The other thing we can draw from this is that if myths have no author, they also have very ritualistic elements to them. Many myths were rituals before they became myths. Any of you who read the Brother Grimm stories, take a few, make them into a ceremony and a ritual, and you would have created something fantastic. We did that with Mother Holly, a ritual which is how to separate a mother from a daughter when the daughter comes of age. Not an easy thing. Any mothers around here know exactly what that means. So we made a ritual how to do that in a very dignified and beautiful way. The story is called the Mother Holly. So the first story I'm going to tell is actually a story from South America, from a people who have lived through lots of suffering and lots of fires. And they tell this story, they live by the Amazon River, they tell this story in order for the algaruba tree to grow each year. If you don't tell this story, the tree won't grow. The forest simply won't grow. So it's a ritual and a story, and it's very old. It's very old. Okay. So it goes something like this. Long ago, this world was consumed by the element of fire. Everywhere you looked, north, east, south, and west, the people had the fire inside of them. That's how all fires begin. It was inside of the people, and everywhere they went, they were constantly burning inside, wanting something, devouring something, desiring something. And it went on and on and on. And of course, those flames were invisible. Those flames you couldn't see because they were burning inside of people. But what happens when this goes on and on and on? Well, soon enough, a real fire, a real flame started to come up towards the east. And a flame started to burn to the south, to the west, to the north. In all directions, fires were burning. Did the people notice? No. They still went on. They still desired. They still wanted. And then, as the fires were burning, the trees started to fall. Still, the people didn't notice. And as the trees fall, the animals fall. And then the world was reduced to an ocean of ash. Because as the animals fell, the people too, everything that you had ever loved, every art form that you have loved, every person that you have loved, everything turned into ash. But we know from the myths that there's a world beyond this world, that there's a river underneath the river. And somehow, two bird beings, they were bird beings. They lived in the other world. And they were the great old angels, the one with the golden eagle wings, the real ones. Not these white, velvety ones, but the golden eagle wings. And they were called Ikanshu and Kune. And they had grown up in this world. So they wanted to come back and find out what had happened. And they flew across dimensions. Now imagine these bird beings flying from the other world to this world. And what they saw was that everything had turned into ash. But there was one character still there, smoking a cigar. Coyote himself. Of course he's still around. And he knew why they were coming. And he said, I know why you are here. You are looking for your village. You are looking for your spiritual home. But how do you find your spiritual home when everything is in ashes? That's a big question. And he said, when the western wind blows in front of you or towards you, your wings, the golden eagle wings, you know how they have the fingers, all the birds of prey? The fingers will point down. And when the fingers point down, swoop down, that's where your village used to stand. So sure enough, they were flying and the western wind came. And Ikanshu and Kune, Ikanshu, they swooped down into the ashes. And there Ikanshu was looking. He was looking for something to eat. He was looking for some sustenance. They were thinking, what has happened here? And he looked and he dug into the ashes. And he found something. And there, he held a piece of coal. A piece of coal. Now, Ikanshu is a special kind of being. He knows what this is. He looks at it, and he finds out, he realizes that this piece of coal is from the last tree that had burned down in the world. A small tear fell down and touched the coal. And he thought, what am I going to do with this? I cannot eat this. But I remember that my great-grandmothers and my ancestors used to make drums out of trees. Drums like that one. And he tested it. So he was beating on the piece of coal, and he made a rhythm. And he thought, okay, and it's the same rhythm as your heartbeat. And as he was beating on it, he said, I've got the last piece of coal from the last tree that is burnt down in the world, but it still makes a sound of a drum. So I might as well dance around this piece of coal. And that's what he did. He started to dance. And then he said, I might as well sing. And Ikanshu, this bird being, was singing and dancing in the ashes of the world and drumming on the last piece of coal from the last tree that's burned down. And he did that for 3 days and nights. And then he fell down into the ashes and he fell asleep. When he woke up the next day, he looked at the piece of coal and he saw something in it. A tiny green shoot started to grow. And he said, I will put it down, and I will dance, and I will sing. And as he did, the tree of life was starting to grow. And as he did, he sang and he danced. Strange thing, he picked up quite a hard rock that he'd found. And he threw it at the branches of this tree that is now becoming rather big. And when the branch fell down, it hit the ash, and a new tree grew, grafted into the ash. And all the new species of trees came from this tree. And soon enough, through his dancing and through his singing, can you hear it now? The world started to reconstitute itself. Restoration was at hand. The heartbeat of the world was still beating. And Ikanshu was drumming and singing and drumming and singing. And suddenly, as the tree of life, the medicine tree, the tree of remembrance was coming back, the forests were coming back. And as the forests were coming back, the animals started to return and the people came back. Every year, the Matako tribe tells this story. And they share the fruit of the algaruba. And they share the seeds. And they remember when they themselves hold that last piece of coal in their lives. And they know what they need to do then. They need to learn how to dance again. They need to learn how to drum and sing again. We all need to learn that, especially when we are holding that last piece of coal in our hands, when everything is turned to ashes. That is when we come together. That is when the rituals become very important. So, let the star rise, let the waves break, and let the flame leap. And if our hearts are wise, this story is for us to keep. Thank you. So there you have a very old myth. No one can write something like that. And what you have in the center, in my tradition, I'm Swedish, I come from the north, we call it the Tree of Remembrance. Why is it called the Tree of Remembrance? Because the world tree grows out of one thing. There's one well underneath it, and it's the well of memory. Now, the well of memory stands underneath the tree. And memory, the memory water, we call it Ur. A-U-R-R. Very strange name. Ur. Because this water, every memory that we have, every experience that we have, it falls like dew in the valley. That's the idea. That's the mythos idea. And the sun, bless the Zen masters, bless them all, bless all the non-dualists. The sun wants to evaporate the dew, right? But there is an old woman. She's not so keen on the rather patriarchal idea of the sun. She's the one who will give you a photo of your grandmother at Christmas. She's the one who makes sure you know what it's like to put a loaf of bread in the oven. She's the sort of one who will be wandering around, with a bit of an apron around, keeping things straight. Her name is Urd. She's the goddess of life and death. and she finds your memories too precious to do away with. So she collects the dew, which is your memories, and pours them into the well of memory. In that well, there is a root, the main root of the tree of life, that grows from this water. If you fall into amnesia, if you fall into forgetfulness, the tree will wither and die. So those people who know that, they make sure that the first thing they look at is their ancestral lineage. They look back and they remember. On top of that water, which is a rather beautiful image, there are two swans which meet in the middle. They form a heart shape, and it's a symbol for love, symbol for the god of fertility, for Frey. So as this tree grows out of our memories, it means that all of that which is required to grow the tree of life exists in the past. The root grows from the past, the tree flowers in the present, and then it reaches for a future that is hidden. In Old Norse, the future is called skuld, which means that it's hidden. But there's one more thing that is very central to the tree of life. And it's one experience that I had personally, and I'm sure many of you have as well. It happened to me in the French Pyrenees. One day, Cannelle, which was an old brown bear, a female, she was the last one to live in the Pyrenees. She was shot in 2006. To me, that was a great crime, and my anger was almost uncontainable because it was after 20 million years of living on these mountains, no one even laid a remembrance for her. The Pope was not there. None of the spiritual leaders were. All my anger went to them. It's called projection. I said, what the hell's going on? They sit on their high seats, they say all these wise things, but a brown bear like that, the Pyrenees, when she left, her name was Cinnamon. We've lost something, a great being in the Pyrenean mountains. And of course, they don't remember their relationships to the bear anymore. So she just became a tick on the IUCN Red List, which is just not enough. And my anger was so great that it's hard to contain it. But I looked everywhere for instruction. I couldn't find any instruction. What do I do in this situation? What can we do? And the instruction came from the ancient mother. The ancient mother, her name is the Edda. For any of you who know the Eddas, has any of you heard of the Eddas? Please say some of you have. Yeah. The Eddas have the same heritage as the great epics of the Mediterranean. And in the Eddas, there's a central tenet. There's the goddess of death. She's quite something. One side of her face is a blossoming branch, the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. The other one, it's like dead skin stretched over a brown skull. She's half dead, half alive, but she comes with wisdom. And she says, if you want the tree to grow back, if you want life to jump up and live again, if you want to ripen the seeds, you have to learn to grieve, not to be angry. And tears, when they fall on these parched land, they also fall into the big roots of the tree of life. And when I saw that, I realized that there was one thing we had to do for the Pyrenean brown bear. There was one thing we had to do for the river dolphin of the Yangtze. There was one thing we had to do for the Japanese river otter and all the thousands, the western rhino and all the thousands of extinct species around the world. We had to make a memorial The first one was built in 2011. And it was built on Mount Cairn in East Sussex. And we wept like kids. The tears fell. And we wept. My goodness, we wept. And after that, we praised life. We sang songs, and we had a great ceilidh. Because when you weep like that, you laugh a lot in the evenings, and you drink, and you have a good time. And since then, the Life Cairns have been built in the Galapagos, where they lost a lot of species and where Darwin plucked all his knowledge from. Every university around the world owes their knowledge from one tortoise, a land tortoise who was called Lonesome George. And they didn't really save him, but they took his knowledge, because through him they understood the theory of evolution and many other species. But the authorities of Galapagos, they came together and they built a Life Cairn. And they wept for their extinct tortoise. And we've done it in the Mauritius, where there is a crisis, and many other places. Many other places. So, entering the age of restoration. It doesn't feel like it, does it, these days? But there has to be a bit of ash before it turns. We have to taste a bit of ashes, and we have to learn to dance in those ashes. We have to learn to sing. We have to learn to drum. And when I tell this story to children at schools, the first thing they want to know is, what happens around us? What are the myths around where we live? So we take them out. One of the charities I run, which when I was presented, was called the Earth Restoration Service. And that we plant tree nurseries inside the schools, tell the big myths, and get the woodlands out into the communities. And I will tell you this, you could feel the memory water when this happens. And so important for children to experience that rejuvenation, that regeneration in the community. Because that's what we have to do. We need to start to plant, and we need to start to grieve and to praise and to come together in rituals of reconciliation. In the Norse myth, apart from grief, which stands as very much the center, the other story which I wanted to share with you, or the idea, is that the sky gods and the earth spirits reconcile. That hasn't happened in this world yet. But they reconcile. And they reconcile by spitting and crying into a vat. And out of that vat, out of their spit and out of their tears, so there was a war between the sky gods and the nature spirits. It's the war that we all feel. We all know what that war looks like in this world. It's the indigenous war. We've all sensed it. It's a terrible tragedy. But reconciliation is possible. At least that's what the myths tell us. And it has happened. But it happens by sharing our tears. And when we do, the sky gods and the earth spirits, when they come together, out of that water, wisdom is born. That name is Kvasir, and wisdom comes out of that water. So, spring is upon us. So I would say this, my last few words. Let it be a God gift bringing. Let it be a wonder sight this time. And what is spring but a great melodious wave that is breaking in light? What is spring but a great immortal bird that is winging hither in flight? A star that is risen from the night. Let us welcome the spring. Let us be rejuvenation this time. So let the star rise, let the waves break, and let the flames leap. and we take these stories to keep. Thank you very much.